Hey, She Slayers, and welcome to a very special episode of She Slays Today podcast. This is number 100. So you can't just have any guest on for your 100th episode. It's got to be kind of special. Like, it's a thing, it's a milestone. And for months and months, Kirby and I have been talking with Dr. Monique Andrews, aka Dr. Mo Knows, and Dr. Tamara McIntyre about doing a virtual double date. So I learned back in, where is the note? Episode 35 of She Slays Today about Dr. Mo's obsession with like consciousness and spirituality and meditation. And that I knew like, wow, she and my husband are like kindred souls. And I just sit and go, oh my gosh, around them because, they're cool people. So then I knew those two could just like geek out about Richard Rohr, Pema Chodron, Deepak, breathwork, meditation. Oh, have you tried this app? They're cool people. I love them. So then in episode 44, I invited Dr. Tamara on for the COVID-19 roundtable discussion. And her calmness and eloquence with words just like stunned me. Like, so literally at the end of this round table, she reads this poem at the end. And she had 5 other women on the episode who love to hear themselves talk, myself included, all just utterly speechless. It was amazing. So then I had Dr. Tamara back on for her own solo episode in episode 56. These are absolutely 2 of Kirby and my favorite people on the planet. I find it interesting that social media and COVID combined is very interesting. One, just the idea of like, hey, we should do a double date. And like, that's normal that would be virtual is funny because they live in Canada. They don't live in Rice Lake. I don't know if you guys know that. Dr. Mo and Tamara, not in Rice Lake. And just having the platform of social media is very interesting because, the essence of social media for some people anyways, is bearing your soul and people responding to it. And so you feel like you've had all these really deep conversations. So I truly feel like we know them and they know us, yet we've never actually met in real life. Although we've had multiple opportunities where I think we were going to be speaking at Making Her Story a couple times until it just, this COVID thing, it just keeps going, you guys. It just keeps going. So, okay. So it only made sense that we were going to have them on for a 100th episode. It was like, yep, great. Before we go into, I guess, their bio, I don't know, whatever I'm about to read, we are going to insert a reprise of one of my favorite reviews that have been left for the podcast. There have been so many good ones. Please don't be sad if I didn't pick yours. This one was just really good. So this one is from Future DC Megan or Future DC Megan. I'm not really sure. I do know that Megan/Megan and I have something in common that as soon as we say our names, we probably have to start spelling it for people because they're going to spell it wrong. Funny story. Okay. So I'll get around to this review, I swear. So I was just interviewed on, I think it's Angus or Agnes. Shoot, that would have been a good thing. See, this is why these tangents are inappropriate because I don't do my prep work as a damn podcast host. Anyways, I was on his podcast last week and he's from Australia. And he goes like, so is your name pronounced Lauren or Lauren? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you just said the same thing. What are you saying? And he laughed and he's like, okay, so you don't care. And I'm like, nope. But yeah, apparently there's Lauren, which I can hear it now, and Lauren. And nobody's ever really asked me about my first name. Everyone's all like, so how do you pronounce that last name? And I'm like, yeah, why? You guys, here's is a trivia question for all you She Slay geeks out there. No, that's mean. You're not geeks. You're fangirls. Whatever. Who knows what my maiden name was? DM me if you know it. But it was way easier to pronounce than Brunswick. But me being the smart strategist that I am, I've actually had someone go like, how did you decide whether to like make your doctor name his name? And some people might think that like the ego in me would have wanted to hold on to like my last name because she's the one who did the work and blah, blah, blah. And my answer is very strategic and not heartfelt at all when I tell people. I'm like, oh, we were moving to his hometown and his last name got like street cred. So it was a business decision. I'm a heartless person, you guys. Welcome to episode 100. Anyways, back to future DC Megan. She wrote this in August 25th of 2020. So I'm wondering if she's no longer future DC Megan and she's just DC Megan or Megan. So she absolutely slays this podcast. Dr. Lauryn is a freaking rock star. Can you guys tell why I picked this review to reread? Reprise. Her podcast encompasses multiple different facets of life as a female chiropractor, and it is the perfect resource as a female chiropractic student. She brings on so many amazing women who I love learning from and see as mentors, even though they have no idea. Haha. I found this podcast and binged it so hard. I couldn't stop myself because she's real, authentic, hilarious, down to earth, driven, beautiful, blah. No, she didn't add beautiful, but like, I just wanted to keep going. Cannot recommend this podcast enough. ! Thank you, Dr. Lauryn. Thank you, future DC Megan. I appreciate it. Yeah. So let's see, what are we doing here? We should probably introduce the guest, guys. How have I not gotten better in this in 100 episodes? I'm just like, just me and this microphone, just having a conversation. Maybe I should organize my thoughts better. All right. So you can hear each of these women's like accolades independently in their respective episodes. So Dr. Mo, episode 35, Dr. Tamara, episode 56. But today I kind of chose to introduce them together as a unit. So I'm going to tell you about something that they've created together, which is the Prana Foundation. So this is the mission statement of their foundation that they've created. Prana is life force, the essence that sustains us from the moment of conception until our last breath. Yet whether guided by misaligned ambitions, burdened by stress, or simply lost on our own journey, we all experience moments of disconnection from the regenerative power of this abundant life force. As health professionals and educators with more than 35 years of experience, we have witnessed these periods of suffering in our patients, our students, and ourselves. It is our mission through the Prana Foundation to cultivate an engaged, supportive community that fosters healing, growth, and the fullest expression of our realized selves through continuing education, a professional community, and personal development. I just thought that was so beautifully worded that I was like, well, that's what we're going to talk about for their introduction. The Prana Foundation also has some retreats that they do. I don't know if their women's one in June or July is fully booked. I knew it was there was only a couple seats left. So if you have not heard of the Prana Foundation, I cannot think of two more amazing people to lead a chiropractic, spiritual, personal development retreat. Kirby and I are planning on going the next time they have a couples retreat to just have awesomeness. So, all right. So like I said, today's basically a behind the scenes of a double date. So that means there was some shit talk, some inappropriate for TV conversations that were edited out. And maybe one day in the She Slays Shares All edition. No, just kidding. That doesn't exist. That's not a real thing. But anyways, we're going to jump right in. You're going to hear us kind of mid-conversation, and then we're going to stream out because we didn't really set the timer. We didn't have an agenda. We just talked. So let's pray, and we'll let you in. Dear God, thank you for everything that's happened in this journey of podcasting. Thank you for all of the amazing people who've come into my life and changed me. I pray people listening have gotten even a fraction of what I have. I pray this has given a platform for important voices to be heard. Thank you especially for Mo and Tamara. Your light so clearly shines through them. that when you're just with them, you feel closer to you. And I pray you continue to bless them and their efforts within this profession and in the world so that they can continue to spread a message of love. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, peeps. Episode 100. Here you go.
We're probably not going to talk about quarantine today. What are we talking about today?
Well, I think we should stick on the kind of subject of somewhat authoritarianism. I would love to hear what just happened with the
censorship.
The censorship. And
yeah, totally.
Can you fill
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and last night was her actual master class that she had for students. And there was 2,000 students registered from 30.
I mean, 2,000 students didn't show up, obviously.
Yeah. That's why I said registered. I'm using my words.
Yeah.
38 countries.
That's amazing.
And I had like the moment that we get on Zoom and you just watch the ticker of the participants.
Of course, I say, as you're logging in, say where you're from. And it was coming so fast. And it was like South Africa, Chile, Mexico,
Dubai.
Portugal. I'm like, I got overwhelmed. Like I started to cry because I was like, whoa, it was like really special.
It was like your eyes just fixed on where the little bubble box was showing the locations, and they just kept scrolling. And it was like Venezuela and Indonesia, all over the UK, and then obviously the US and the different institutions, and everybody was typing it in. And so like it just kept going. Like I caught it on my phone because I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah. I thought, I'd probably get a few hundred, whatever. I've offered a free masterclass before, but this was like, what? I mean, I had to buy like the super duper Zoom webinar. Right? I'm like, oh shit, there's $1,000.
What inspired the class? Because you've done multiple classes. Was this one more?
This is really your classic gateway. Like if people are going to be introduced to Monique.
Really, this is one of my very early signature talks that I do on the neurology of subluxation. And so a student group from a chiropractic college reached out to me and they're like, hey, we're doing this science night. This was like in December. We're doing this science night. Would you speak? I'm like, of course I'll speak. Right. And then they're like, well, you have to fill out a speaker application. So I fill it out and then they come back and they say, well, they need more details. I'm like, okay, like they got an annotated bibliography of my talk on neurology of subluxation. It's all like evidence informed, the whole deal. And it's like weeks. And I say to Tamara, I'm like, I think they're going to deny it. She's like, don't put that out there. And then sure enough, we were in Costa Rica and I get an email back. It's just after Christmas. And it says, they said no. I'm like, what? I'm like, can you ask why? So she goes back and they say, we don't give out that kind of information. And then I write to a senior college administrator that I know there, just not a friend, but we kind of know each other from the circles or whatever. And I write to him and no response. So is it my hair? Is it, I use the word subluxation. Is it because I used to work at another chiropractic college? Is it?
It actually, for me, yeah. And so then you go into like, what exactly about her? What exactly about this topic?
I don't think it was the topic. I think it had more to do probably with, my previous affiliations.
No, but you're just guessing.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm guessing. It doesn't matter.
You're guessing.
That raises an interesting question of, one, have you ever faced that before? And two, is this something fairly new that colleges are?
It's not new.
To get to the
No.
When I was I can only speak to at Northwestern, Maximized Living was treated like a cult.
Oh, yes. You can't have access to our
Oh
students.
My gosh, no, they would not let. So they did let Reggie Gold in, but they did not let. They were.
Yeah, it was it was like when we were in school, and there were certain people that weren't allowed, and then it changed when the president changed. We went to Palmer Davenport, and when Guy Reekman came, everybody was then allowed on campus. But I've had, this was the first, it's not the first time I was actually banned from a school, but the other one was the school I used to work at, but that's a different story. Yeah.
It seemed like, I think chiropractic, because we tend to, I mean, there's a lot of divisiveness within our profession anyway, and then different schools at different decades and periods of time, who's administration, what are they trying to do, what kind of education are they attempting to deliver. The concern really, I think, for both of us was, I don't know what was controversial about talking about scientific literature as it relates to the neurology of why we do what we do as chiropractors is going to offend any college, regardless
I don't
of
think
its affiliation.
I don't think
it's like,
maybe it could be the word subluxation, but I mean, it's a lot of politics, really.
Yeah. I mean, I could see it being, and aren't we really good at hypothesizing like what happened? I think we're great. We're going to solve this.
I'm glad you think so.
Right. I could see it being embarrassing as a college of like, to paraphrase kind of like, I'm sure, it's so hard because you've got like the ego. So it's not like they were consciously like, oh no, this will like, I feel shame and embarrassment, but like on some kind of level of power of like, well, if she comes and talks to the students about this, we're going to need to have professors that like are answering like, well, she brought up this, what about this? And we don't really know much. We don't have anybody who's doing this level of research. So then we're going to look bad. Like we're employing,
Here's the sad truth, Lauren. And that is, I don't think the administration actually cares that much about faculty.
I think that's true.
Well, they care about themselves though, right? Like ultimately they care about the dollar.
But that's also why I never said what college it was because, well, I'm classier than that. And that's not the point. Mm-hmm. The point is, and this is a problem across all colleges, is for ego, political, philosophy, whatever reason, these colleges that garner massive tuitions are really selecting, based on not the right reasons, what their students can and cannot listen to. And that's not new. I think it's always been like that, very sadly. If I was a student, I would be kicking up a stink. I did kick up a stink when I was a student.
It just stinks of a paternalism of they're training these people to be doctors so they can go out in the world and be someone that people trust with their health and their lives, but they can't be trusted with controversy or different information like that. Yeah.
This is the free speech issue on campuses. Like you think there should be intellectual freedom at an institution of higher learning, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And something I said in the video is like, this is the intellectual equivalent of burning books, like not allowing access. They're going to go get it. And in fact, it backfired because 20% of the world's population of chiropractic student now have access to this talk. Well, actually, everybody has access because I just dropped it for sale.
And you too can.
I mean, and that's a lesson that doesn't seem to be learned is like whatever you ban, you give it. I mean, good for you that it does give it power, but whatever you say, like, absolutely don't look over there. I just want to look over there now.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's the complicated, it's what holds us back as chiropractors is, and it's like, even last night as we're watching the ticker, and I'm managing the chat piece and collecting the questions throughout the master class. And ultimately, when you're choosing topics for podcasts, we all know where the gaps are and what questions, doesn't matter what content we're delivering, what questions and where do we end up? We end up in the space of, okay, I want to talk about adjusting. I want to talk about technique. I want to talk about business. I want to talk about all those
always
things.
Like, what's the best technique? I'm like, oh my God, really?
But it always ends up in that same sort of place where it's kind of like, this is what I'm not getting. Where am I going to get it? And so for those of us that are out there saying, I'll answer your questions, I'm going to make myself available. It's kind of like when to adjust, when not to adjust. I want to understand the neurology of what I'm doing. I want to understand, okay.
Oh my gosh, the post I did the other day, that was the joke with the pie, that this is what chiro students get in school. Do you know what? That post got more interaction and responses than any post I've ever made. I was like,
whoa. It's the thing that we talked about while she was in school of like, you had like one business class, right? And it was like, they expect 80% of you to go out and start a business. and the only
Totally.
people know anything about business. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
bonkers.
And yeah, totally. And then, the patient care piece, like I remember a while ago, you posted, Lauren, a picture of Sousa. It was an old version. You're like, little lunchtime read,
Which I'm like, textbooks are so much cooler when you're older. Like I went straight from like high school to college to like grad school. And like, I was always so annoyed by like the 35-year-old or the 45-year-old in the class who's like, all right, any final questions? And we're all like packing up and they're like, how does this apply in real life? And we're like, come on, Susan. Damn it. But now I'm just like, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Did you know the adductor attaches there? That makes so much sense. Oh my God.
You had it as like a lunchtime read. And the thing that happens with me is because most students know me as an administrator in charge of clinical education, like the whole piece of how you apply and what that looks like in practice, like they actually are pretty sure I just carry around textbooks all the time, right? Like they're pretty sure that's like the way I do everything. And then the reality is they come with all of these questions. They don't know where to go look it up. They don't see that, like, until there's that patient with that thing that they're struggling with, that they needed to know about the adductor or they needed to know about this other, it's like, then all of a sudden it's like, oh.
Yeah, then it matters.
Terrorized by so much insignificant information that just having to consume one more thing, it's pretty overwhelming when you're in school.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a question this week that came on Instagram and it was like, I'm learning all this stuff and I don't really know how much of it I'm ever going to use, honestly. And I know I'm going to use it for boards, but then there's all of this other part of the profession and content that I want to learn. But I'm so burnt out at the end of the day. Like, I'm just really worried, like, how do I know that I'm getting what I need that from actually like my day-to-day school? And how am I really going to find time to focus on what I know I'm going to need when I'm in practice? And even then, they don't know what they're going to need, right? Like you and I both know
That's life, though. Like that is absolute what life is like, yeah, I wake up and I have to spend time telling my toddler to put her boots on 7 times. And then, I get to work and I have to deal with bullshit there. And then so, yeah, by the time I get home, I'm tired. And you either choose to stay in your shell of a human or you have to find that energy somewhere. Like you have to, because it doesn't go away. You don't get more energy when you're out of school.
But I think there's the thing of like like what they're saying, the franticness of, or the need that comes from actually needing to know it, of like having a patient who has that problem solidifies it so much differently in your head. Yeah. And you actually learn that skill or learn that knowledge and keep it. I saw a TikTok video from like a CEO in India who said like the next phase is we built up this entire thing around like education and pedigree of like where you went and what grades you got and if you have an MBA. And he said the next phase is skills, where I don't give a shit if you went to Cambridge. I don't care if you have a Harvard MBA. Can you do the job that I need you to do right now? If you learn to code in your parents' basement, and you know how to code for what I need you now. Like,
how does that overlay
chiropractic's a hard
profession where it's like, well, please don't learn chiropractic in your parents' basement.
I mean, is that you?
Somebody's valid point. Somebody's living room. Like if you said, where did you learn?
It's like Kirby said, don't look over there. No adjusting outside of class. Right.
I got adjusted so much while she was in chiropractic.
They can't come after me now. They can't get you now.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's an interesting point, actually, we were talking about not that long ago, is what you see very oftentimes is you see students and young docs saying, well, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And, we were talking about that, like, that's kind of the wrong question. It's like, why is this patient presenting? Why is this person experiencing what they're experiencing? And when you understand the why, then figuring out what to do has meaning. Like, it's like where to go look that up or why you're going to look that up at lunchtime and being okay with, this is what I know because I collected all the information and it's not, I just need somebody to give me the answer right now. And that's kind of the mentality that school is cultivating. It's like regurgitation. What's the answer? What's the answer? What's the answer? When in actual fact, when you're in practice, like you get more comfortable the longer you're in practice with uncertainty and knowing what you know, knowing what you don't. And there's no ego associated with your like, I have no idea. What do you think I should, like, what's going on with this person? Like, I need some help.
That was me more than her.
Yeah.
She was like a walking Sousa.
Well, and then like, so, school, they have to teach us certain things in order to get the degree. I mean, I guess for them, it's to stay accredited too. It's not like a school can be like, we're not going to teach biochem. Right. But then
some schools have tried that and then they lose their accreditation.
Yeah.
And then, and then they,
Yeah. I mean, my job in my last passion project was I was in charge of clinical education, which ultimately meant I was responsible for making sure that the students learned what the regulators wanted them to know. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that, or they blame the limitations or the quality of what's being provided on the accreditors. And I would say to you, like I remember saying to a student, we were just finishing a service trip in Mexico, and I was driving with a pile of students, and they had asked me, they were really sort of like, I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting what I need. And I said, well, first of all, let's just make sure, like, the colleges and universities now are responsible for giving you the degree and giving you all, and giving you all that information so you can, check the boxes to get the license, but they're not responsible for your education. Like, they're not assuming responsibility for your education.
Yeah,
they're assuming your responsibility for a degree.
There's a difference, Tamara, between saying they're not responsible for your education and they're not assuming responsibility.
Correct. And that's
two very different things.
Yeah, because the actual education and assuming responsibility for the education, institutions could be doing, they're just, some of them aren't. Some of them are, but some of them aren't. And I know that in that role, they could. Like, they could be teaching biochemistry in a manner
from a functional perspective. That was interesting,
right?
It's not like the joke about my graph was like half of your degree is the Krebs cycle. It just felt like that because nobody, well, I won't say nobody. It's rarely taught from a perspective that is meaningful. It's like you just have to memorize the stupid thing.
It's so far removed. And so, when I say like assuming responsibility for education, like imagine if all the neurology classes talked about neurology, not from a PhD. Here's the neurology that you're going to get in a chiropractic college, but here's the neurology that you need to really own as a chiropractor. Like, they all could be doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't.
So like I
hopeless, you guys. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I think it's really just,
we're probably just bitter.
Edit that out, asshole too. So it's like, I mean, if I were running a school, and again, I say this all the time, like nobody asks me, I don't know why, but like there's so much divisiveness in our profession, which I would like to think that there is divisiveness in other professions.
I don't think that's endemic to chiropractic.
And I don't be like dentists hating on dentists and stuff. And like,
and I think the problems we're discussing are also not endemic to chiropractic, like political issues around who gets to speak where. And, sometimes you have to pay to get to speak places. This isn't unique to chiropractic. I don't want anybody to think that, definitely don't want anyone to think we're trashing on chiropractic, which we love. And we would love for there to be, the ultimate program. No school program is perfect.
But if I were running a school, I wouldn't want to pick a side. Like, is it kind of one of those things where if you don't pick a side, then you're going to lose everyone?
By both sides. So if you truly had like an open paradise of let anyone speak.
Northwestern was offering flu vaccines the year I left. And you can't have that coexist at the same time as,
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is a certain amount of, different institutions, if you think of the continuum of chiropractic, I mean, over the years, different institutions have a different reputation for sort of hanging, somewhere on that continuum, right? And so there is that reputation and that space that they kind of hold. But then there's the other piece, which is, if we're really being honest about chiropractic, like, I'm going to do it, but like the manner with which our educations are run, they're principally run with a male model of leadership. We are in a touching, nurturing profession, but that's not necessarily the conversations we're having when we're learning about, like when you have your very first technique class, are you actually talked about, do they actually talk about autonomy of your own body? And do you actually have those boundaries when you're a student as far as how you touch each other before you go into the big world of touching other human beings? And are they having,
it's very male oriented.
Yeah.
In its instruction and oftentimes in its delivery, and I think you said this, Tamara, chiropractic is actually quite feminine.
It's very feminine. I mean, if you think of like how many women, Lauren, have you had that conversation where their big struggle is delivering force? Because it's just to their core, like the actual, how much force, like, I don't want to hurt anybody, because we've been brought up since we were little girls in this culture that we're not meant to be wrestling physically in the playground. And that's, that's not who we should be. And then yet we go into chiropractic college. And I remember I had this moment and I'll never forget it. I went into my pelvic class and we're learning how to adjust.
Slam the sacrum.
Well, and the instructor said, it's going to take 75 pounds worth of force to move a sacrum.
Whoa.
And I was sitting in that class and I thought, I'm out. Like, I'm going to have to figure this out, but there's no way. Like, I thought, oh my God, I could never imagine putting 75 pounds worth of force into another human being. And I thought like that moment for me was so critical, because I just thought there's gotta be another way to do this, because if that's what I'm going to have to do, then I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Like that felt so wrong to me.
Yeah. So it's like, it's this very mechanical, and, even when we say masculine, when we talk, honestly, I feel like, Mo, you were the one who said this when we were talking, but like, masculine energy does not have to be delivered by a male. Like the masculine energy is so necessary for the okay, listen, people, you've got 28 credits this trimester. You're going to need to have a to-do list. You're going to need to have structure. You're going to, and like historically that masculine energy is that very get this done, have this process. And so we're just stuck there though, because, there's no conversation about spirit. And it took me 8 years into probably 8 years into practice, probably 80,000 adjustments. And I started to realize that there was intuition, that not even in just knowing what to adjust, for sure that happened but literally our bodies were interacting and their body was giving me information that I wasn't even asking for. Way earlier it was oh, I have to adjust the right sacrum. I don't know why I know that, but then 8 years in, there was this other level of just this merging, and it's nobody ever talks about that and how spirit lays in. And so that's the feminine energy that is missing.
Yeah. They talk about it in some techniques like network. BGI gets into that. What's happening with this energetic being, right? And literally how the field integrates my information, your information, you, the person on the table, the concept that we think that the boundary of self is the skin, that it's our body. Right. But where is the boundary of self? If we think about what our physical manifestation is, just the level that we're vibrating at, but that doesn't mean that our other energies aren't merging. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you're totally right about that that's what practice is all about, is it's about your own journey it's not like there's this idea that practice, like that growth experience that you're just talking about, it's like you start practice and it's in your head. And you're trying to, and then you get to a place where you learn about your own intuition and you relate to that. And then you get into the space you're talking about, which is, I'm sure when people watch us work, they'll go, why did you do that? Or where did you go? Or why did you ask that question?
Adjusting a baby and have people being like, what are you feeling for? And I'm like, oh, I mean, I can't guess. I was feeling for tone and energy moving. I can't tell you. This is like
I'm the worst technique teacher. So when it comes to the clinical stuff, Tamara's she gets annoyed when I say this, that she's the genius. But like, if I'm working on someone and a student says, what are you doing? I'd be like, I don't know. I'm just, this is like,
I'm
helpful. You don't have words.
I don't have you ask me about anything about the brain and neuroscience. I like, take it down, but ask me when I'm working on somebody and I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to talk. And I never wanted to talk in practice either, actually.
Yeah. But it's that part, like, that's what I love about chiropractic is I love that space of for me now, 20 years later of working with and on people, is we are energetic spiritual beings living in a physical vessel. And we can know so much more about our patients outside of words and outside of the construct of what we originally were taught, that we now 20 years into practice, there is a knowing, like when somebody lies on the table and watching the way they breathe and so much more in how they relate to their body that they tell me that then will inform the way I'm going to approach that body.
Was it Rumi quote? What is it? I'm going to mess it up. There's a voice that doesn't have words, listen.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think that we know
about a field. There's a Rumi quote about a field.
Yeah. There's a lot of great Rumi quotes.
There's definitely a couple Rumi quotes. Do you guys just sit and talk about science and spirit all day long?
No, we were listening to your podcast on Valentine's Day, and
yes,
not helping. You're not helping.
And the couple piece is really interesting because what I'm most passionate about, to be really honest, I love listening to her speak, and sometimes I don't want that detailed information.
Oh, I just found this and she'll be like, no, I don't need to know about the nucleus accumbens anymore.
Yeah, I'm like, meh. And then there's moments where I have my own thing and I get excited, but then there's also listening to the couple piece. And part of the reason we had even talked about doing a couples retreat is that all of those things you talked about, it's respecting each other and where's that shared space that we connect in personally, and where's the shared space we connect in professionally, and how do you place that in your life so that you're not lying in bed talking about the newest research article. I think that actually takes work.
I think we probably talk more about mindset and psychology and spirit than we do about science or clinical stuff.
Well, I think one of the things we've said before is we're both really interested in the human condition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just naturally my eyes and the way I observe the world is a feeling space. So I think we probably talk about the feeling space.
Yeah, the human predicament is fascinating.
Human. Yeah, way more than probably the
nucleus accumbens.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a fight Kirby and I got into a couple weeks ago. We're talking, so we'll put the kids to bed. We get ourselves a cocktail. We find a show, and then the same thing I do on the podcast where I interview people and go on tangents. I'll be like, hold on, pause it for a sec. And then an hour and a half later, we're still talking about something. So what were we talking about that you felt you needed to preface? You said God or whatever you would call it. And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean? He goes, and so he started to explain himself to me. And I'm like, I know. Cause he's like, well, I didn't want you to think when I said God, I meant a man in the clouds with a beard. And I'm like, I'm your freaking wife. What do you think that I think that you,
Well, I carry my own baggage with the word God. And so I think I was relating something that I was reading. I just read Be Here Now by Ram Dass. So I was out there.
The clouds.
Yeah.
And so I was very much I was relating to that and thinking about God. I always go back to sitting in my, the church that my dad's a pastor at and that God, Jesus is that guy on the wall who happens to be white for some reason. So no, but I still qualify myself.
Yes, that's what I was looking for. You qualify yourself, and I'm like, you don't need to
do strangers, but not to your wife, probably.
Yeah, but actually, I think that that's sometimes the funniest. There's funny moments, and for us as a couple who have been together for so long, where there are times where I'm talking because I want to talk about something. And we had this funny interaction really recently where she's like, oh, do we have to talk about this?
I don't want to talk about this anymore.
And I said to her,
masks or something.
Right. And I said to her, okay, just to be clear, I don't care whether you want to listen. I need to talk and you're it because I've got nobody else right now around me. So if you could just humor me by looking interested for a few more minutes so that I can have my moment of reflection out loud, I'd really appreciate it.
So do you actually communicate with each other like that? Like, do you?
That was the first time that was when I was like, I can't talk about this anymore. And she was like, listen, you don't have to talk, but you're going to have to listen because I need to talk. And there's nobody else to talk to. It might have been the end of quarantine where we're like, OMG. And she was just like, no, we're in a partnership. So you're just going to have to, this is your service to me by just shut up and listen.
So that raises a question of Tamara, do you process thinking out loud and as you're speaking, you're thinking, and Mo, you're more cook it all in your head and then say something?
This is the interesting thing. I think we're both expressive introverts and we've had to learn who needs space at what time, so that we have our independent space. And then there's the place where I really do just need to talk. And I think that this year has really, I didn't realize how much I depend on even just communication to relate to another human being, because I've just had so little contact this year that if I can have an exchange where I can relate to another human being that is not somebody I know intimately, that's kind of an acquaintance in some way, I didn't realize I got something from that. It makes me feel connected because I'm not out in the world right now. So if I'm in a restaurant and I want to have a conversation and, the person that's serving me wants to talk about their experience in the world with a mask, she basically, if there was a GIF where the eyes are rolling and somebody's falling backwards, that's basically she's like, I'm out of this conversation. And
that's when I reread the menu for the 8th time, even though
right. And that's what she'll do. She just checks out. Whereas for me, I'm interested in listening to another human being's experience.
I'm not.
And she's not.
Hey. So
I talk a lot less
about what they're going through and listening to them.
Yeah.
Actually, I think what I do talk a lot less. And I'm I think when I was younger, I used to, and now I just sort of feel there's not that many new words or something. I don't know what happens to me. And I don't know what the hell I was going to say then.
Yeah.
Because neither of you, are both of you working at home, from home?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So back to the conversation of boundaries and relationship. What kind of daily rituals, how do you incorporate, do you have a large home where you can go to different corners or
Thankfully, yes. And we each have our own office and we're on different floors. Our offices are on different floors. We meet in the morning, we'll have tea, we have a daily practice that we do, meditation, prayer, movement, what have you. And then it's kind of okay, see you at lunch.
Oh, that's
literally. And
Yeah.
off we go.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
I think we've tried to kind of mimic a little bit of like what has worked for us historically. I like getting up early in the morning. I like my private time in the morning. She's not as much of an early morning person. She knows that I love making breakfast. I really always want her to be interested in breakfast, and sometimes she's just not. It's very upsetting for me, but and we will meet in meditation some mornings, which I really love, or we do it on our own. Sometimes I'll go, I'll exercise and be out running, and she'll have her time. But we always know, like, there's this time kind of every morning between 8:30 and 10 a.m. where it's our dance of what we need for ourselves personally.
We check in. What's your day look like? We always know.
Yeah.
But then there's just like
separation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
When if you have a couple working at home together, and because we are living in a city that's new to us, we actually, when we moved here, we didn't know anybody. And then COVID hit. So we really don't know anybody.
And we still don't know anybody.
Yeah.
So knowing how to take care of ourselves, like me knowing how to take care of myself, knowing what I need, asking for what I need, being very clear about that from a communication perspective, and knowing how we each work, like we'll check in and like I do have a do not disturb on my door. And we respect that. Like, we need our own personal space, our own personal autonomy of our own schedule. And then we still have that conversation about, what are we doing for dinner tonight? Or, I'm going to make some lunch. Would you like some? Or I'm making breakfast. Would you like some? Or I'm going to make breakfast.
Better eat that breakfast.
Yeah, like today was a perfect example. You had 2 coaching calls and I went for a run and I came back and it was like, I could make breakfast now, but I would love to have breakfast with you. When are you available? She's like, I'm available at 11:30. I'm like, okay, well, I'll have breakfast ready for 11:30. Yeah. And it was literally, she goes to her office. I, go for my run and shower.
It's
and
good. It's been a really healthy way to do it.
Yeah.
Actually. And, I think if we live consciously, like we make conscious decisions around how we relate to one another. This is the biggest challenge that people have, right? Is to actually like not take things personally and to be really conscious about how you manage yourself, how you manage yourself in relation. This is a big struggle for students and young docs today because those are gifts, I think, that come with age, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too, I mean, one of the things that you guys had mentioned on the podcast was the way you interact from a respect perspective. The older that I've got, the older as a couple we've got, the more respectful I've become because my words have the potential of being more hurtful than anybody else's. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to unleash, then I have to also understand that while it may not have been my intention, the person I love the most is going to be the recipient of whatever it is that comes out of my mouth. And so I feel like as we've gotten older, we've gotten even more respectful of that vulnerable space when we're stressed, so that I'm even more aware of how I'm feeling and how I'm showing up today is going to deeply impact her more than anybody else in this world. And I take responsibility for making sure that I'm not creating another dynamic in her day because I don't have my shit together,
Sorry. So I deal with so much like people pleasing stuff that comes from, which I think, is probably a very normal, like you're 20 something doc, you feel like this imposter and you just want to everybody like me because I'm broke and I don't know what, and I feel like I could see as I continue to take steps towards I'm going to show up consciously in my interactions with my patients and consciously in my interactions with my staff. There's more, because I was going to ask you, when you're saying you're being conscious, Mo, I was going to say well, is that realistic if you're in practice and you're seeing 80 people that day? That sounds exhausting. But what I'm doing of like not showing up consciously as, I don't want to say not my genuine self, but like whatever they need to me is part of the exhaustion of why at the end of the day, I'm like, just fucking pass the salt.
It's what takes the most energy when if you do not show up authentically, then you're always playing a role. And that's the exhausting piece. You know, something that we say a lot in the foundation is who you are as a person precedes who you are as a chiropractor. And that the tools that you need first and foremost are the ones that allow you to love who you are and to be that person, to show up as that person. Because exactly what you said, Lauren, that whole, the imposter thing that comes from pretending to be somebody else. And,
well, the other big piece is that, you know, I think a recipe for burnout is being everything to everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not possible. And I think, you know, we enter in the role of doctor wanting people to feel better, but we get, you know, I think there's early on in our career, we give so much that we take away from ourselves, you know? And so, you know, to be in our own power, you know, the definition that I love the most is when we're personally powerful, people can come and take what they need, but it doesn't take anything from you. And I think that that's actually rings true with our patients. It's like, if we can be really solidly grounded in who we are, what we do, why we do what we do, then patients can come and, you know, they can take what they need, but we're not attempting to be anything more than, you know, or give anything more than we have to take away from ourselves. And that kind of self-management piece takes a long time.
Well, and when you're 25, like you showing up authentically, maybe like, hey, like, I don't know. Like, is that realistic? Like, you know, you can show up authentically now because you are a wise, interesting human. You know, like I can show up authentically and be like, oh my God, breastfeeding. Like, yeah, it feels like it's like cutting you with glass. And, you know, like, because
that's authentic.
Yeah.
We work with 20-year-olds.
You haven't done that. Like if you haven't.
We work with 20-year-olds who are like maybe authentically showing up in your vulnerability and being like, I'm new, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like,
but I got my people.
If you can, I think, and you know, maybe this is some of our role, your role, Lauren, and you have a great impact on so many young women in chiropractic, is to like, people talk a lot about holding space. It's like this, it's become a marketing buzzword. But and very recently on our retreat, what happened, I was talking with a student, and it was the first time someone showed up to one of our retreats we had never met. And she said, I was talking to her, it was getting near the end. And I said, you know, how are you doing? We're, you know, having a check-in. She said, I've never felt more seen and heard. Like people talk about holding space all the time, and I actually feel it. And I think that if we really focus on like words matter, if you're going to talk about holding space for somebody, then part of our job is to hold up the mirror and let them see that who they are is beautiful. And that's the first step, right? Is for them to know that they're already perfect.
Yeah.
And so in this age of, oh my gosh, the self-help and all the things, and it's like, let's help you just be you. Because that's beautiful.
And I mean, that's what I love about your messaging. It's what I love about, you know, the way you and Kirby have put your relationship out there, the way you put yourself out there, the way you're willing to explore those things. It's, you know, a lot of the younger generation of doctors that are coming out are so exposed to seeing a level of perfection in its expression that they've lost the ability to meet themselves where they're at and be okay with it. It's like, of course, you're 25 and you're entering a profession and you don't know it and you're not sure what it's going to feel like. Of course, that's going to feel uncomfortable. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, is your ability to basically, you know, it's like Monique said, it's like, but who are you? Be okay with where you're at. Be in a constant state of learning, observing, reaching out to the people you relate to in that time and space and growing, then yes, you know, the result is wisdom, experience, comfort.
Yeah. Of course, it gets easier with age to show up authentically and We just have to keep holding the space and the mirror to let them see.
25-year-old may not have wisdom that and what all the other things, but they can show up and be consciously present.
Totally.
They can be
non-distracted, focused.
Yeah. They can be confident while being vulnerable of like, that sound, like in the example of like a mom who's breastfeeding, it feels like a razor on her nipple. You can be like, that sounds really hard. How are you? Do you have people that you can talk to? But, we pump out, again, kind of back to the first part of the conversation, we pump out these people who think they're supposed to have all these answers because of that, like much more like masculine energy of like, do not show vulnerability, do not connecting. Connecting isn't what they're paying for. They're paying for the 75 pounds of force to the sacrum.
Right.
Well, you know what? Like connection is the most important thing. And if you're a 25-year-old doctor, don't try and show up like a 50-year-old sage, like if you're the 25-year-old doc with the 38-year-old mom, then maybe your role is not to give advice about I can hardly even say nipple razor blade at the same time. You know what I mean? It's like, just do you.
Well, I mean, I remember,
I don't know, maybe
but I remember this moment when I was a younger doc. I remember this moment with a patient of mine who was pregnant and was really uncomfortable, and not just like physically uncomfortable, but really having difficulty being pregnant and knowing that culturally it's not okay to say, I actually am not enjoying this. Like I thought I would enjoy being pregnant, but I'm actually really struggling with being pregnant. And I remember the moment, and of course, as somebody who's never been pregnant, I just sort of am having this conversation. And the reason that she chose to to sort of say like, I'm uncomfortable being pregnant. She says that to me because I've never been. And so maybe I can relate to her in that way. But we have this moment where she says, where I had said to her, I am 100% confident that not every woman that has ever, that there are other women who do not enjoy being pregnant. And it's really unfortunate that our culture does not allow you to say that and interpret it as being, I don't like being pregnant, therefore I'm not going to like being a mom. Like those things are not the same thing. And so we have this moment where we're having this kind of exchange, and then she just starts bawling and says, I just want this fat suit gone. And then she's like, oh my God, I'm so glad I could say that. Like, I didn't realize I was carrying that much emotion associated with these changes that have happened in my body, And I think that's the kind of thing, like when we say hold a safe space, it's like, there's no judgment. And in that moment, I felt so honored that she could have that release and have that conversation and know that I was not going to judge her for it. That she could talk about how uncomfortable, because I'm working with her body, because I relate to her in that way. And so I think, if that younger doc can just meet people where they're at without judgment and know that they can say whatever they can.
It's hard.
It's hard.
I totally, it's easy for me to sit here and be like, anybody can show up authentically. It's hard. I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like your guys' journey, I know you guys are both spiritual and you both have practices and everything. Does it feel like that ability to hold space for people and not think of things dualistically? Were you drawn to spirituality because you're in this profession and you hit your head against the wall long enough and learned that you had to do that? Or did that come from spirituality influenced your practice more, or like your actual doctoral practice?
That's interesting. I mean, I grew up in with a religious background, and I think I became spiritual in spite of that. Like, how that kind of goes. Yeah. I think I would say that my deeper appreciation and need to have a spiritual path came after the challenge of having to deal with people in practice and learning what that meant, like how do I deal with my mind in relation to what's happening here? And there's, for me, spirituality is a lot of it has to, yes, there's a connection to source, to God, or however you want to call it.
Oh, yeah.
But it also is about finding a place of stillness to be able to drop deep into soul and just let go. And that's a practice that just has evolved and continues to evolve, and that I love.
I think for me, I'd answer it differently. I grew up going to church every Sunday, and I grew up with one parent that I would say, in reflection now at this point in my life, one parent where spirituality was an inside, like my dad, everything about his spirituality and God and his relationship with God was his own. And we could see that. And my mother was much more outward in her expression. I mean, she was much more like we were going to church as a family, and we were getting dressed up and looking a certain way to get there. And there was a certain amount of, there was a little bit of incongruence. And I think my father passed away when he was 48. And in the process of him dealing with his morbidity and mortality, he and I have had a lot of conversations that I would now say were about being human. And so what drew me to chiropractic to begin with was the connection with the power that made the body has the capacity to heal the body. And it was not like that ultimately was what attracted me to chiropractic. Like, what would it look like if healing was an inside job? What would it look like if healing was our own responsibility? Because when he was diagnosed with a malignant tumor, I had conversations with him about his relationship with his life and with his journey. And for me, it was like in that moment in time, it's like we are all here to experience. We have been gifted a life. We are energetic spiritual beings that have a physical vessel. There is no guarantee how long that physical vessel or that life is going to be. And I would attribute a lot of that to my dad. So when I assumed the role as doctor and facilitator, so much of my conversation was about meeting people where they're at in whatever aspect of their health journey, wherever they were, like we had written on the wall, we want to empower people to understand their bodies and its expression. I mean, that's really what I intended to do from day one. And so, I think spirituality and how I relate to my body, how I relate as a non-interventionist, how I relate to the world 20 years later of watching and being with people in their health dilemmas, worked far more than I ever imagined with people with cancer. Right now I'm working, and I'm very much connected to a former student whose little boy was just diagnosed with a terminal cancer. My ability to meet somebody where they're at in that journey, I'm not involved in the drama anymore. I trust that God has a plan, and we are just privy to that experience. And so the best I can do is meet somebody exactly where they're at and support them in wherever their struggle is. And it's my dad, I think, that gifted me the opportunity to live my life that way.
I think spirituality affords us the ability to let go. Like, you can't resolve a new baby being born with terminal cancer. How can you possibly resolve it? Mm-hmm. So you have to let go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you say God has a plan, that, and this is where it is really hard with the person you're talking to, if they are imagining a man in the clouds, that God has a plan can be very jarring. For all of the hurt and the hate. But when it's like there is energy and love that, gets cycled through, and it is not chaotic. It does not know, because that energy is so pure and love, like it cannot be chaotic. So, when we're seeing the expression of chaos, like that can't be, that's not the plan, So.
Well, it's interesting because with multiple other, sort of within the community that knows and is rallying around this particular individual. I've had a lot of conversation with them individually, because there's you learn words to be able to diffuse any attachment people have. So if somebody has an attachment to God and they think about God in the clouds, then I'm not going to use that word. I'm going to talk about a greater plan, the universe. We can play with whatever that is, but ultimately, whatever word that's non-triggering that we're talking about, it's like I'm having a lot of conversations right now about, and this rings true really for where we are, in a vaccination COVID kind of world. It's like when our values are non-interventionist, then what we have to deal with is a culture that believes that intervention is going to have the answer and is disrespectful of those that may choose to not intervene. And I think that there's a misunderstanding that we're not choosing intervention versus not. I think for many of us, where we really do come from that place that our body has an incredible capacity to heal, and I'd like to take responsibility for my own health, thank you. Our decision is in intervention versus not. Very oftentimes, I think what happens is you're a non-interventionist and we have fear. Fear that if we don't intervene, it's going to be a problem, or fear if I do intervene, it's going to be a problem. And so for us, the conversation and how we feel, where our values are, what our belief system is, really is going to, help us make that decision. Is, learning about the fear space is also about trusting and understanding that there's something greater than us that actually is playing out.
And then I'll explain the physiology of fear.
Yeah.
I love, there's a great Gandhi quote that says, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's fear. And fear grips people. And it's not just a psychological process, it's a physiological process as well, that then starts to drive the whole machine. And I think this is a really great place where chiropractors can actually have an impact and say, look, the adjustment can actually help you deal with stress better. It can make you more adaptable. It can make you more resilient. And if you want to know how, go ask Dr. Mo, but I just know it works, right? Like we can have an impact in many ways that go beyond explaining to somebody, like, the intricacies of it.
Yeah.
That's where being an effective communicator comes in, especially in a time like now where everybody's sympathetic nervous system is through the roof.
Yeah. Do you feel like we're being dealt fear from a strategic and opportunity?
So when we were in Costa Rica, there was this really interesting moment. So I used to lifeguard, I used to teach swimming, and of course we're at the ocean and everybody's talking about their relationship with water and swimming. And I had said, there's this whole instruction method where babies actually don't need to learn to swim, like they were in water. And so there's a whole instruction method where, and videos, if you've never seen them, they're amazing, right? And you just watch the movement pattern that comes so naturally, and you watch these babies kind of just float to the surface.
When they're like dropped in the water.
Right, when they drop in the water, and there's no fear. And so when I'm talking about it, I said, well, if you teach them fear, they'll drown. And there was this calm, and one of the attendees said, actually, I never thought about that, but that's what's happening in this world. It's like, if you teach people fear, they will drown. I mean, it's debilitating, right?
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
In fact, I know it's a bit of both. It's that whole nature nurture thing, because the brain is hardwired to look for danger, right? That's how we evolved. Now, we don't need to be looking for saber-toothed tigers still. Yeah. And I think what you were maybe getting towards is the current narrative designed to create fear? And I would say yes, because it helps to propagate the trajectory that's desired for power and money and whatever the end game is, right? It's not just about big pharma. Some people believe it's about depopulation. we could go down a whole road that it's not in my area of expertise, but, you talk to people like Billy DeMoss and, wow, I had a conversation with him a month ago and me doing the mind blown thing, because it's not a place that my brain goes to think that people are orchestrating this in order to cull an overpopulated planet. But there are many people that believe that's the case, and maybe it is. I don't know, but that's a really that I have to be more hopeful and positive than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the questions I've had from the very beginning in this last year. And when I'm struggling with something, I'll always want to go academic first. Like that's my safety. It's like, okay, give me the facts. And then at least if I have the facts, I can start to, sort of decode things myself. And so the question I had was, what are they so afraid of? Like, what about this virus are they so afraid of? Like, because I understand their paradigm. I understand how they choose to approach things. And now I've learned the public health narrative, so why are they why is cultivating fear the strategy? Like, what are they so afraid of?
Because makes people acquiesce.
Mm.
Yeah.
If people are in a state of fear, then they're going to move towards something that they think creates safety. The brain is designed for that. Our highest human need is safety. Number one, safety. Mm. How do we get there? Do what they say. And if this is our culture, is to follow, government, big pharma, medicine, what have you. Gosh, we should try and talk about something pleasant.
Well, no, we don't get to talk about this stuff with people.
Yeah, it all gets into, and not just government institutions, but it seems like social media. I don't know if you guys have watched the documentary, The Social Dilemma, but it's a lot what you're talking about of they're kind of hacking the brain and using what the brain wants to look for, which is fear. It's how marketing works, is you create a problem and then you solve it. So we get indoctrinated not just by our institutions, but by our entire economic model, which I'm laissez-faire capitalist kind of promoting, but there's not really an alternative. It doesn't seem like there's as much noise happening or people.
Simultaneously, though, what's interesting is it's like, I don't know, I guess when we look back at 2019 and some of the social uprisings that were happening publicly, it feels really disheartening that, actually it kind of makes sense that there was a momentum to walk away from some of these things that were happening that were like, this is not okay. And people were starting to not acquiesce. And so something kind of big needed to get back in line. But then how do you hold that thought? And this is what draws me to spirituality, is the comfort of not knowing, of not being in either dualistic thinking. But my brain goes well, shit, I think people are good, but this doesn't seem good. This seems very powerful. So how do because do you believe people are inherently good?
Yes, I do. I do. And I want to believe that. You probably have heard of the meta meditation, where you put out that you want people to be free from harm. They want people to be free from discomfort, free from struggle. I think that we have to come from that place. And especially as people in the healing world, you can't carry that negativity around. And if you do, it will destroy you. And I think it's the essence of what draws us to something like chiropractic, that you have to believe, and as a spiritual person, that our purpose here on this planet is love And that all these other things that are happening, the struggle for power, the struggle for money, the struggle for control, this is created by these narratives that we allow, that we indulge our minds to go, right? And when that gets put forward into a collective consciousness, like happens with the tyranny of some of the leadership, then you go to those places. But that doesn't, those individual people, probably they're not bad people. It's just they got caught up in this bad idea. I think I fundamentally believe our purpose here is to love one another, and that in the end, whatever, when you die or when you pass, I think that we ascend into that. I think that is our reason for being on the planet. And if we just can always remember that, what is my job? What is my job? For me, it's about my mantra to myself whenever I have a question and I'm really stuck, should I do this or not? Is like, does this ease the path? If the answer is no, I don't do it. And for me, that's about love. And we just keep coming back to that. There's all kinds of bad shit happening all the time. It happened 100 years ago. It happened 10 years ago. It's happening now. We have to keep coming back to my purpose is love. And even if you're wrong, guess what? You get to have a better life. The people around you experiencing your love get to have a better life. I'd rather be an optimist. I'd rather come from a place of love and be wrong than come from a place of fear and anger and negativity and be right.
And it's funny that attachment to anger can be a block in your path. Ram Dass says, like, it's okay to protest as long as you can love the person and the ideas you're protesting as much as you love yourself.
Yeah, anger.
Protest. It's okay, but you can't be attached to your anger and your not themness.
Anger can be a very useful tool because actually it gives you a consciousness around, it gives you cognitive awareness of, hey, I'm having a feeling. Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, it's anger. Why am I having that? And then you can actually have a conversation in your own mind before you start. You never have to scream at anybody. It can be a positive construct that you use for the power of good.
See, and I'm not a human being that relates to anger. I never grew up in an environment where there was any, I sort of did the shutdown as opposed to the explosion, like that was not, that was sort of my childhood. And so for me, I choose to look at, like, there's a lot that's changed in this world really quickly. And so, people checking in with themselves and taking, responsibility or questioning their own health decisions has changed. My ability, like, I've met some really amazing people this year. I mean, you guys are part of that. Like, my path has crossed other people in a way that I'm incredibly grateful for in this last year. I am on the beach in Costa Rica. There are far more sea turtles that are nesting this year than any other year I've ever been there, because humans are not there intervening with nature, and so, even just the work and our ability to connect with, other people that maybe we can help or support, like, that's been a gift of this year. And so I would prefer to stay focused on what flowers are coming up as a result of this really interesting time. Like, I feel so grateful for my privilege so that I don't have to worry about my bills, a roof over my head, my family, my own health, because I actually am very empowered and understand it in a way that many people don't. So yeah, like, I just choose to stay in that place of gratitude and love, because I am not interested in inhabiting anything other than that,
Yeah. And do you believe, like, in naivete? Because, like, I'm naturally I used to be, I should kind of, like, stop saying what I am, because it's, like, really evolving at a faster pace than I think I am. I think that when you're talking about leading with love and assuming love, and if you're wrong, what's there to lose? but if you're holding on to the ego of like, I will look stupid, that I was wrong, I will
get
look
taken advantage
I will
of.
get taken advantage of, like, you know, is that a concern for you at all?
No.
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 If you asked me that 10 years ago, it might have been. Now I have no attachment to what anybody thinks about me anymore. You know, Jung says up until 40, it's like your life is just a practice. You're practicing. Yeah, no, I don't have any attachment to that.
Yeah.
That's a gift of age, I think.
Yeah. I mean, here's what I would say. I mean, I watch you, Lauryn, having conversations in a very direct outward way that I have personally with people, but I'm not sure I would be super comfortable doing it in the way that you're doing it. And you are growing as a human being in front of other people. And
yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
That's an amazing thing to watch. Like I so love watching you grow. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way. It's that by you putting yourself and your vulnerabilities out there in the way that you do, you've created an opportunity for so many people to just feel their own vulnerability and normalize it in a way that they can grow. Like there's just so much power in that.
Yeah.
It's cathartic to do, for sure. Like when you have to when I have to talk about like ego and how it shows up for me still. And like, you know, it's sheds light. It really just helps that process go really fast because I'm very impatient. So I think that's kind of, you know, so I'm also very selfish. Like I don't know if you've listened enough to know that like, this is all about me. Like I'm not necessarily being vulnerable for others.
And it's good that she does this because offline, she won't go to therapy like she's busy. So when she can do therapy where it like benefits
it's not
her
that I won't go to therapy. It's that I keep finding therapists that are annoying. And like, I'm just like, yeah, okay, next. Okay, got it. Yeah. And then like, I'm jarring to them because, you know, it's like when we went to therapy. When we
try a Jungian therapist. Sorry, you were going to say?
No. So we went to therapy as a couple. And I remember where we were like on our like 10th session.
Yeah. And we were just like working through doing this kind of conversation, like the way that you guys talk to each other about spirituality and, you know, being aware of each other and how to respectfully communicate. And we're just doing it back and forth. Right. And he just started us with a question. Then we had been talking for 25 minutes.
And he's just like, I mean this politely, but is this a show? Like, do you guys do this? I'm like, yes, we talk so much.
Ad nauseum.
So much. He just wants to talk and talk.
It's the interesting thing about talk therapy, actually, because if you are a verbal processor, then you can sit and you can actually go, but you can create a narrative in an outward way through conversation that, you know, in a conventional talk therapy, you can kind of walk away with. And I've been there. I'm saying because I know I've, you know, walked out of a therapy session and thought, I could have done this in my own journal.
Right.
What did I just pay for? Like,
if we can go back to the ego question for a second, and I think it's common for people to like try to like stamp down the ego or ego is bad when really it's a tool.
It's totally.
And just like your mind, it shouldn't run the show.
Yeah.
Right. It's a tool that you use. What is that quote? Ego is a great servant and a terrible master. Mm-hmm. It's like that, I think.
I think ego has become this really horrible, like, it's like we're not supposed to be in ego, but ego is also what allows us to be successful in the way that we are. It's like to have confidence in ourselves and put ourselves out there and go, I have something of value that I want to share is an ego. Is ego. It's, you know, for
well, you couldn't do your job if you didn't have ego.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to work and help people.
Yeah. So how does ego show up as a servant?
from being conscious, from being awake.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say that, oh, it's really, I'm being selfish, but actually you're using that part of your ego for good because you're doing this thing and you're sharing it. Yes, it's actually helping you to share it publicly, but the impact that you're having by doing it is creating change for many, many, many people.
Well, and that's the win-win.
Yeah.
It's by you knowing yourself in the way that you know yourself, and by you having that confidence that's supported by ego, you are actually helping other people. People, it's like that win-win, like ego when used in its, in its proper way is exactly the way you're doing it. It's, I know myself, I have confidence in myself, I'm going to expose myself, and other people will benefit, is a really great way of using ego. What's not a great way of using ego is where all of that negative connotation kind of comes from,
or you actually believe it all.
Right. Or you actually think, or you really believe it. I mean,
like you indulge the idea that you're superior or greater, or that the world revolves around you only, or.
Right. Yeah. Which I think you inherently, both of you inherently already know that that's not the case. Otherwise you wouldn't be as humorous in the way that you do. Certainly, like, who wore it best?
Legit an episode called "Is Lauryn a Narcissist or a Psychopath?" But, okay, let's be honest. We have Googled it. I do not fit the bill.
No, you completely do not.
It's a spectrum. So if narcissism's over here, she's not over here.
I'm not.
But she's not all the way there.
But we've definitely Googled, like, well, what exactly is wrong with you?
We're going to just say this would be, in my opinion, just my opinion, this is when there's a healthy ego. There's a healthy relationship with ego, and you're willing to relinquish it and find humor in it and understand that, when it's driving you, but you're also not going to steamroll other human beings.
Can I tell you, here's the perfect test to see if your ego is out of control or not. Okay. When somebody writes something about your ego and you're offended. It happened to me just the other day. Somebody posted in this thread. Actually, it was that chart. And everybody's like loving it, and the students. And somebody posted, and they basically said, check your ego at the door, Mo. And I literally laughed out loud. No, I laughed out loud, and I thought, oh, thank God.
So sorry that I wasn't there to comment.
Oh my God.
His response gives me diarrhea. I'm just like still on the internet, just like, oh my God, I can't believe that person said that.
Yeah. We can't take that stuff seriously. Social media it's a fun tool. For me, it's a creative fun. Yep. And, gosh, if you're easily injured, don't go on there. That would be my advice. Don't put yourself out there anyways, if you're easily injured.
Well, and that's where I kind of, the truth behind what I was saying of like, yes, it is helpful when people kind of say like, you sharing this helps me. Like I literally get, and I'm like, okay. Like when people say that about the podcast of like, this helped me. Dr. Nisa's episode was extremely hard to do, but having people be like, that helps me. I'm like, okay, because I wanted to crawl inside a hole. That was like, so really hard, to do. But it forces me to grow quickly, grow very quickly. And that is like the selfish part of like,
because you're impatient.
Yes.
But growth,
grow quickly.
Like I'm putting myself out there, Mo, where you say like, don't go on social media if you're easily offended. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sensitive. I'm like this fragile flower of like, what do you mean one person doesn't like me? But why?
I think there's something.
Can I send them flowers?
There's a thing too. It's kind of what you're saying with anger. I think that upsetness, or Richard Rohr says like, I wish daily for a humiliation because it shows me what I need to work on.
Yeah.
Like that thing where like, if you are sensitive or if you are angry or if you are humiliated, it's the thing you're talking about with anger of like, oh, good. Now I know, like, now I know where that hurts. Like, so I get to deal with that.
Well, and it's interesting too, right? Like we live in a culture where, the default is to not be like, the default is I'm uncomfortable. I need to fix it. Like I need to quickly do something about it. Right. Like and even with the word diversion, like it's not, I'm doing something different. I'm diverting, I'm trying to get out of the discomfort. But I mean, really growth only happens in those places of discomfort. It's like when you have those moments of humility, when you have that like, oh, wow, I'm observing and I'm uncomfortable right now, and whether that happens with, I didn't use the word I really meant, or, oh my God, I didn't realize that would feel that way for somebody else. Or, I want to make a statement, but I'm not sure what the statement is. I just know that isn't resonating with me. Like we grow in that place where we take that one small step, we put it out there, we recognize we're uncomfortable, and then we do exactly what you're talking about, Kirby, which is, and what about this has me feeling like why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling?
Yeah, we have to examine. There needs to be examination, right? Yeah. And this brings me right back to what we're talking about with chiropractic schools and education and how it's like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And I'm like, just step back for 1 second and be like, why is this happening? Like, why am I in this space? Like, we have to reflect to see what has led me here, because this is where the real valuable lesson comes. And if we're so impatient, and I get impatient, Lauren, because I am impatient, it's been my greatest lesson.
Is Mo an 8?
Yeah. Do you guys know your Enneagram?
I'm an 8.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I'm sorry if I'm wrong, because so my mom's an 8, my dad, we're very convinced our 5-year-old or 6-year-old's an 8. So, but it's like kind of the harshest, Hail Mary of are you an 8? And people are like, oh, and you're like, why would you say that about me? I'm like, I'm sorry, because I think you're an 8.
Yeah. I'm an 8 with a 7 wing. That's the bear.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, how did you know?
It just kind of, I don't know.
It's
an energy. Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Samira, what are you?
Do you remember?
I think you're a 3.
I think I'm a 3.
Yeah.
I think I'm a 3. Yeah.
Awfully I don't know. You're awfully selfless.
Lauren's a 3, so
3s are very vain. Very vain. That's their cardinal sin is so tell everyone.
So I had this really, so this is, we talked about therapists. I'm going to share this because this is what's popping into my head. So
don't worry, it's just
I'm with a therapist, and I've my whole life up until this moment, I'm aware that this is my narrative. So I'm going to give you my narrative. I'm a bit judgmental. I'm ask me what I think. I'm going to tell you what I think. It's going to be really direct. And my internal dialogue is, I'm a little judgmental. I wish I wasn't so judgmental. And so I'm sitting with a therapist, and I somehow this, aspect of me and self comes out. And the therapist just really seriously looks at me and she says, if I said you were discerning, how would you feel about discern? If I said you're discerning and not judgmental, how would you feel? And I went, oh, I feel so much better. I have no problem being discerning, but I have a problem with being judgmental. And the therapist goes, then why don't you try the word discerning on for a while? And it changed everything for me. I'm like, oh God, that feels so much better for me. I'm just discerning, And so when you say vain, I'm going to tell you what that's changed. So the therapist changes judgment to discernment, and I'm good. Vanity, totally had that going for a lot of my life. And then I changed it. And I just am really aesthetically, perceptively inclined. I love things to look a certain way. I'm unapologetic about it. I like when things look good. So I'm no longer vain.
So you should definitely work in marketing.
I'm no longer vain. I just really like
You're
things.
Aesthetically inclined.
I'm aesthetically inclined. And that is a game changer for me as well.
We could do a course in marketing communication.
Yeah, and you need people to see when you are aesthetically inclined, because that's also the big part of 3.
Hey, look, the very first time that Monique ever spoke to a big crowd was at a convocation. and she's speaking at a convocation, and I really actually enjoy not knowing what she's going to deliver. I like being an audience member, and so I'm in the audience.
I'm going to finish this story. Can I finish this story?
No,
okay.
no. And so she's talking, and I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. And then, okay, you can have it. Go. Say exactly what happened.
This is the first time I've ever spoken in front of a large crowd, 700 people. I'm giving the convocation speech at a chiropractic graduation. And I get up there and I say, I was really worried about giving this talk. Actually, you might have seen it. It's on my Instagram page. And I say, I thought they're going to want me to say something good. And I say, you might want to know about difficult cases in practice or da-da-da. And some of you just want to know where Dr. Mack gets her clothes. And the place erupted because every student in the place was like, yeah, we do want to know.
And all of these students, they knew where I was sitting. They all looked around. They're all chuckling. And I was in the crowd and I thought, oh my God, she just said that in public. And in truth.
Oh yeah, it was true.
I was like, oh my God, are people really wondering that?
Yeah, I can see that.
I thought, no, really, are people wondering
She is a 3. She is a 3.
Oh so this is what 3 looks like.
Okay.
Words. This is what 3,
there's hope.
3 looks differently when we remove the attachment to vanity and judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Then
move towards discernment and aesthetically inclined.
Right. Then I can love myself a little more.
To anger.
What's that?
Can you do your marketing turn of words to anger for Monique?
Yeah, I think anger becomes when you take it to the positive, becomes a constructive force for your own power.
I have one word.
What?
It becomes passion.
Yeah, anger becomes passion.
Ooh,
yeah,
okay.
I had
Do
justice,
Kirby now.
I had justice in mind.
Okay, so Kirby's 9. So procrastination.
Oh, so procrastination, in my opinion, if you're asking, procrastination is really about perfectionism. Because really, it's a really easy excuse for why you didn't do it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't have enough time.
I didn't have it set in my mind.
It wasn't in my mind. So I'm going to be okay with what I deliver, given that I didn't have enough time to make it perfect. Mm. So there's like wanting or knowing very clearly that this would be a perfect execution as possible. And that's what you'll always aspire to. Except if you don't give it enough time, then you let yourself off the hook for that perfect execution. It's easier to deal with personally and internally to know that it was as good as I could get done in the time that I had.
Yeah.
But honestly, I could have done it perfectly.
Can we go back to talking about me for a second? I didn't really hear everything that you said, but I was thinking about the anger and the passion.
I love it.
You loved it.
No, but it made me think about teaching in a classroom and some students being terrified of me. And because I think sometimes people discern passion for anger.
Well, and just the way that you might relate of if you're an 8, like confrontation isn't a big deal to you. It's kind of how you interact with the world. You bump up against things. And if someone has something to say, they tell you, and then you go, cool, glad we did this.
And it terrifies people because they know I'm going to be like students would say, I could see you look right through me, because I'm willing to just be like, what? And it would be like, they used to call it the Dr. Mo death stare, right? The glasses would come down and they'd be like, oh my, and I would ask them a question in class because I would learn their names. I would have 60 students in a classroom. Within 3 days, I've memorized everybody's name and I would call them out by their name. It would maybe that's why they were terrified, but then they would be so terrified by me calling out their name, they'd forget the answer. Right. But I think passion can become misjudged as anger, and that
it can be misused, right?
It can be misused. And I don't want the angry people out there thinking, I'll just tell them I'm passionate. No, if you're an angry asshole, don't be that either.
Be angry with love.
Yeah, I don't know.
Be angry
just
with
use it constructively.
Yeah.
Use it if you need it to assert you need to express. I don't think it's healthy to repress anger either. Like anger has a job. It's telling you something, like any other emotion that you have. It's telling you something.
But you can name it what you want.
Yeah, that's nice. It's so much.
Us threes would really prefer not to have emotions. Like, fine. It's good.
Not outwardly.
Yeah, no. So what is next for you guys? So you just got back from a Prana retreat. You have another Prana retreat in June. Okay.
Hopefully,
What
as long as
2021 going to look like?
We've got some big things coming up, some very big things, something that we can't talk about yet. Something that we can talk about is Tamara's sort of just about to relaunch her brand. So she's been doing some work there. And I think that's going to be really exciting because a lot of people, more people know who I am because I've been out there speaking on stages all over. And so my brand, my 8 brand has kind of been defined. And I think more people are just starting to learn about her gifts. And so I'm really excited. The foundation's really excited to see her blossom and grow in the world, to get to experience more of what she has to offer in terms of her mentorship. I think that's really what I'm pretty excited about that. I'm sure Tamara is.
Yeah. I mean, this time last year, I wasn't sure. I knew what I loved to do, but I wasn't sure how that was going to play out, in which form, what was that going to look like? And ultimately for me at this point in my life, I want to do what I love to do and I want it to have meaning. And so, I spent, I think last year sort of just trialing a number of different things to see where I felt like it was a really great fit. And now that I know that, the next piece for me, I mean, anybody that's, that has a business has to figure out what's their languaging and what's their brand and what are people attracted to? And when people are giving you testimonials, what are they consistently saying, and because so many people met me as a senior administrator in charge of their academic sort of education.
Carrying all the textbooks.
They didn't get to see the side of me that is where I feel most me. Like over a table, talking about patient care, talking about patient psychology, being able to, work with young docs who know that they don't want to be pain-based, but aren't really even sure how to take a patient from I'm coming in with blah, blah, blah. And how do you take them to a different place in relationship to health and wellness and their relationship with their own body, so I needed some help. Really just this year was a lot of listening, like who are my people and what are they looking for? And so, like I've been playing a lot with that languaging, and feeling like I have much more clarity associated with what that is. Yeah.
Okay. So I have some questions.
Okay, do it.
So Mo, how long have you had like the Dr. Mo Knows brand?
Okay, this is really cool. So Dr. Mo Knows, it's actually, it made its first appearance only a year ago at CalJam was the very first time I launched Dr. Mo Knows.
Okay.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say you had like a brand before?
No, I had a personality, which is big. And so people kind of, people knew me because I was speaking on the chiropractic stages for the last 3 years. And so that's kind of put me out there a little bit more. And then my brand, it honestly is who I am. It's not, I didn't build it. It just is me. So it was the easiest thing in the whole world.
Okay. So I'm going to need your help editing this question.
I'm her offense translator. She says something too harsh and offensive. And then
go.
Like you do.
So there is something magnetic about each of you individually. Absolutely. But when we're talking about, like chiropractic school where it needs like the masculine, but it needs the feminine. It's hard to get through chiropractic school without the feminine. When I see you two, and not to either, honestly, even put either energy on either of you, it's interesting to me that you have this desire to keep your brands or as like separate tracks where it's like, I'm assuming the Prana Foundation is kind of where you would say your brands merge.
Yep.
I think the question is like, have you thought about instead like really focusing on growing that? Because that is what is needed, right? Is we need this hard, like the neurology, we need this, like that's what's necessary to be a doctor. But then Tamara, you're coming in with this, like this way to incorporate it through like all these things. And it's like, well, why are they separate? Can you guys figure out how to merge these, please?
Yeah, it's just two. I would answer that two different ways. One, we have always been in business together and we work incredibly well as a team. And what we've learned over the years is we also need our own autonomy in some aspect of our expression. So she needs Dr. Mo Knows to be her. I need my own thing that's just mine. And when we know where we connect and where we work best. And so when we created the foundation, we knew that connection between like, people have asked us like, you guys could run an entire program, like between the two of you and what you love doing, you could teach anything.
Oh, symbiotic and like,
and our personalities also are attractive to different people. Like we communicate in different ways, but yet ultimately, once people get to know us, then they see how we work and what we collectively have. And so when we built the foundation, it was about that collective educational service community piece. And me having my own thing is because what I know about myself is I do actually need my own thing to be me. Like I, it's kind of like, the couple's bank account, or it's kind of like that. It's like we have what we are 100% committed to together. And I still want my own bank account.
I would say this. I love that.
Like that.
I love that question, Lauren. And a couple of things I would say, and you're not the first one to say like, there's this dynamic that you two have that's very compelling. And in fact, when we met with some branding people a while ago and they were like, you two are like a force of nature, like a force majeure. And I would say that the foundation is really in its infancy in terms of, I don't think we haven't really developed it's like we're both in it. And my signature program is Dr. Mo Knows, and Tamara's signature really is in her advanced mentorship. And I think we're not totally clear yet on what the foundation is going to look like when it grows up. Give us another year. And I think,
okay, I'll give you a year.
I can't wait to see actually, because I know it's going to be incredible. But it hasn't fully developed yet. And it's sort of like we needed to get something out there really quickly when we had to make a shift. When we had to leave California, it was like, what are we going to do? Okay, we always had this idea of the foundation. Let's do it. And then it was like, okay. People know who you are. And we know that you can teach, go teach online. Dr. Mo Knows, boom. Like we had to move because we had to make a living. We were burning through our savings. And so it was like, it was Thanksgiving of 2019 that the foundation was born. And I would say that it's maybe just starting to walk. It's definitely not starting to talk yet. But it's going to.
Oh no, you guys froze up. Let's see if they come back. They'll come back. Can you guys hear us? Oh wait.
Yeah. We just
okay, now you're back. You froze up.
Where did you lose me?
You said
it's not learning. It's not learning to talk yet.
Yeah.
Right. And then I said, and this is where the teaser comes in, which is hopefully
that's
it would have been really great if this is where the teaser comes in and that's where it goes.
is hopefully within the next few months, we're going to have a really big announcement to make. And
Tell them privately.
no, we can't. We're not going to talk about it yet. But it's a big deal. And we're so close and we cannot wait to be able to make that announcement. And I think it's going to be really big for the foundation.
The other thing too, Lauren, is defining me is what we're doing now. And we're going to do more work in that realm for the foundation so that we can, really sort of explore more of the vision and what that, what we'd like that to look like. It's,
Thanks for asking that. What a great question. And you know what?
I appreciate that a lot, actually.
Yeah, because it's something that
people need is both of you. And so it's like when it's kind of like, well, we have these two separate, when it's like sold, I don't want to say sold, but like,
yeah, we know what you mean.
Option of like, well, which one are you doing? It's like, ooh, which one do I, need? And it's like, we need both, and the profession needs both. And they're just,
well, we do have some mentorship programs. We have a small group mentorship program that's both of us together, where it's we meet bi-weekly with a group of young doctors. And so a lot of our mentorship programs are together. We just dropped a polyvagal course last year we did together. We're speaking at Mile High together. So you'll start to see more of that.
That's what's happening. Like we actually planned, we've got 3 or 4 courses where we're co-teaching, and we've never co-taught that way. And so the polyvagal class was the first time that we'd ever done that. And so she did the science, and then I talked about the application of it with patients.
Cool.
Yep.
And we're going to do the same thing with HRV. We're talking about doing it with exam, which we thought might be actually really fun, is to come from it from a principled perspective of neuro exam, patient flow, and play with that aspect of it maybe. Because we are constantly asked, how much of an exam do I really need to do? What do I do with it? I'm in an office that doesn't do it, like all of those kind of things. I think we're going to deliver course content in that way.
It's going to be fun. I can't wait to grow up.
Yeah.
I cannot wait for you two to continue, because it's awesome.
It's fun to watch.
All right. Final questions. All right. Rapid fire. What are you reading right now? I don't mean in this moment, Mo. Like
she's like, there's a sign behind the computer.
Like she's
says,
randomly.
Do not disturb. Oh, I'm not supposed to be in here.
I'm rereading The 12 Stages of Healing by Donnie Epstein.
Oh, okay.
If you've never read it, it's very interesting.
I'm reading The Web Has No Weaver, which is a pretty foundational sort of reading for traditional Chinese medicine. I'm reading, I'm rereading When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate.
Must read.
So I'm just reading those. And so those are my, less fun reads.
Yeah.
I haven't read fiction for a while. The last time I read a novel, it took me a year. So I was like, why am I doing this? Just read what you want. Don't read fiction because you think you should.
Yep.
I always have one of each on the go. One fiction, one non. Always.
She said it was rapid fire.
I know, you're right.
Kirby, what are you reading?
What am I reading?
Well, I mean, I thought I would ask you.
I just finished up Be Here Now. I'm currently reading a book on British history that's like summarized and kind of pithy and fun. And then I just
started fun. I don't know.
It can be. It's in a way that's it's fun to hear it from their perspective. They try to like trivialize America while also going not a power anymore, and they are. So it's fun in that regard.
Yeah.
What are you reading, Lauren?
What am I reading? I just finished How to Think Like a Monk. And I liked that one. It was interesting because I started listening to it, reading it. And I was like, oh, is this going to be just kind of like another Rachel Hollisy thing? And then I got into it. I was like, okay, I actually really enjoyed it. And then I have the archetypes, the women who run with wolves. That is.
Yes.
I told Kirby that is like reading poetry. Like I read like 4 pages and I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Good. Yeah.
Every sentence I want to like underline and like put on my Instagram. And I'm like, did you see the sentence? Yeah. Okay. What's your rapid fire question?
I nerd out on like people. So you guys said you both have a practice, but like, what is that? Is it breath work? Is it mantra? Is it chanting? What do you do like each day?
It depends on the day. If I'm in a really Zen mood, then I'll sit and I will do Zen meditation and like go for the still mind. If I'm really struggling and have a hard day, I might even use a guided meditation. I might take out my mala and, chant through a whole cycle 108 times. It really depends. It's like anything. And this is something that people miss about daily practice. They think it's like they have to sit on a freaking cushion and try and levitate. Like meditating is not about thinking and a daily practice for me is usually some sort of meditation, some breath work, and definitely some movement.
Okay.
So movement for me is going to be running or cycling, road cycling. I prefer to not engage in formalized work before 10 a.m. I like actually starting my day at my natural rhythm. I like to decide how intensely I work out based on my HRV. I like objective information. I like to have a good sense of
Nerd alert.
Where's my stress?
Do you have like a Whoop band that like tells you your HRV every day?
I have a little thing. I put my finger in and it gives me an idea of how much I can push myself. I actually really like intense workouts. I really love to push my heart rate intensely. I know what my lactate threshold is. I've always wanted to exercise like that, and I really love it. And I'm too old to do that and break my body down. So I need the objective because my subjective will never choose to exercise moderately.
She loves objective measures.
And my meditation, like I'm super boring. I find guided meditation very oftentimes gets in the way. I'm a big, like I have a gong and an om and it's the same all the time. It just varies in the length of time. And yeah, like that's my favorite form of meditation is just to hold a hand position depending on what my needs are in that moment. And I love the stillness of just being still, but I'm a big omer.
My favorite is definitely silent meditation. And on the perfect day,
She annoy you when she's oming, and you're like,
no, if she needs to om and I need to be silent, we don't do it together.
"That gong up."
But on a perfect day, I have a silent meditation and I end up in a boat. I always say this idea that the job is just to stay in the boat, right? And on the most perfect days, my father will be in the boat with me, and it's divine because he answers my questions and he's like Buddha right there.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's really nice.
Okay, folks, there you have it. Episode 100. So if this episode was inspiring to you in any way, I would love, maybe take a screenshot and share it on social media. Don't forget to tag me so I know that you left a screenshot. Or if you've listened to She Slays Today for any of the last 100 episodes and have been meaning to leave a review and just haven't gotten around to it, gee golly, it would just mean the world. If this was the day you did get around to it. Reviews and downloads are the lifeblood of podcasts and what helps bring on great guests. It makes the podcast stand out as like reputable, and people are like, okay, sure, I will donate my time to come talk to you, Lauren Brunswick. To each and every one of you who's been a part of the last 100 weeks of my life, thank you for allowing this space for me to authentically be me. As an Enneagram 3, showing up, we're called the chameleons. Showing up as who I am truly every day in real life is difficult. That's very difficult for 3s to show up authentically. We like to morph into the conversation with who we're talking to make them like us. Again, not 3s, not about them. It's all about us. But anyway, so real life is difficult. And somehow when it's just me and this microphone and 1,000+ of my best friends, y'all just make it easy. So with the unintentional decided catchphrase ending that I never really put much thought into and just kind of turned into itself. Until next week, She Slayers. Bye.